Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that's committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles as introduced by Sydney Banks to people throughout the world. Today, we have Gayle Nobel with us, and Gayle is an author, a transformative coach, parent, mentor, blogger, and inspirational speaker. And she has a lifelong connection to autism through her brother and son. And I'll just go ahead and talk about your book a little bit and then turn it over to you. Gayle wrote this unbelievably beautiful book called Space of Love: Understanding the Power of Thought and Wisdom in Living with Autism. And Bill Pettit recommended it to me maybe, I don't know, a year or two ago. And I bought it on Audible and listened to it then, but because we were doing this webinar, I listened to it again. And it's you share the wisdom of this understanding so beautifully in your life circumstances of the situations that you have with your son. But as I was telling you before we started this, the wisdom that you share applies to everything. I could completely relate to everything that you were saying, even though it's not my life circumstance. So it's just so beautiful. And if you haven't read it or listened to it, I highly recommend it. And I'm so excited that we finally did this because it's taken us, I think, over a year
I think so.
to get you on the schedule.
Yeah.
So thanks so much, Gayle. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, I'm really happy to be here. As you said, we've been working on it for a year, but life just kept getting in my way, and which didn't permit me to do this. But here I am. And where to start? So, my son Kyle is 37 years old, and he has what would be categorized as pretty severe autism. So, that means he needs assistance with pretty much everything in life, in different degrees, and he really can't be left alone. I mean, he can be left alone in a room, but he can't be left alone in the house. So he needs to have somebody watching or caring for him at all times. And it was 2015 when I stumbled upon the principles, and I literally stumbled upon them as a it's similar story to everybody. I think I just followed a bunch of breadcrumbs, and there I was reading Michael Neill's book and going, "What is this? I'm drawn to it, but I don't really understand what it means." And in a conversation with a coach at the time and being very new, I was struggling with something with my son, with Kyle, was something he was struggling greatly with. And I had this conversation with her, and I don't even know what happened. I've gone back in my memory many times to try to figure out what really did happen. Something happened in this conversation. And afterwards, everything looked different to me. And I know we hear this a lot in the three principles community, but it happens, and it's perplexing and it's so amazing. And it really helped me at that point sort of figure out what next steps I needed to take, but from a much clearer, less stirred up kind of perspective. And from then on, I just felt like I had to know more. And as I went through Michael Neill's 2016 Supercoach Academy, and as I was in more conversations and listening and training, I was able to see so much how helpful this understanding was for my life with Kyle. And that's when I began to notice the stories that you read in Space of Love and felt like I have to write this down because there's something here. I need to kind of grab onto it. And to just try to define and pin down what it is, it's tricky. It's tricky because so we end up with a child with special needs, in my case autism, and it's something that we we might be afraid that this might happen, but we don't really expect it. We don't necessarily want it. um, we feel you kind of go through almost like grieving or a sadness for the expectation of the child that you thought you were going to have, and now you have this child and there are all these issues, um, and you don't exactly know what to do or feel prepared for it, even though my brother is very similar to Kyle, but he was institutionalized when he was a little boy, and it was a different world in the 60s for autism. So I didn't really have a lot of any anything to go on in that respect. And you just kind of are forced to dive in, but there's this, like, you're wearing a heavy blanket almost of this sadness, and almost a desperation to fix this situation. So you kind of start out that way. And of course, the typical belief would be that it's the child that's causing that. So if you don't really understand where your experience is coming from, that's what it looks like. And all throughout, it looks like, if only I could have this, this, and this, if only he could do this, if only I could fix this, then I could be happy. Then I could be happy or feel good or feel at peace. And when you start to kind of see the actual truth and where your experience is really coming from, I don't know. For one thing, it helps you, it settles you down. Not that you always see it, but it does, you do kind of settle down. Um, you're able to enjoy your child more. I think you're able to have more moments where there's not so much this desperation that something has to be different than it is. Um, and you're also able to navigate life, I think. And that's what I love about the principles is, and the reason I talk about the power of wisdom, because it's one of my favorite aspects of this is wisdom and our connection to it. And where does it is it from outside, is it from inside? It's this whole beautiful, amazing connection that helps you navigate and guides you. And when you have a child with autism, who now he's an adult but he's still my child, there are so many decisions to make, and I write about this in the book, and so many things that you feel like you have to figure out and navigate and go through. And now that, for me, understanding wisdom, knowing it's there, knowing it's available, knowing it'll show itself to me, um, is is the very best. It's like this, I have this little jewel in my pocket that I carry around. And even if I'm not always in tune with it, like, I sort of just know it's there. And every once in a while I can touch it and go, oh yeah, so I'll figure this out. Yeah, I'll figure this one out. Um, I have a little story, and so I've told this story before in different settings, but I'll I'll tell it again because I think it's a wonderful example of wisdom and how it's there for you. So Kyle was in a serious car accident not quite 4 years ago while being driven by a caregiver, and he was lucky. He had a lot of fractures. He was in the hospital. He had a couple surgeries, and when it was time for him to go home, so all along they were telling me he wouldn't be able to come right home. He would have to go to one of those rehab places. And I just went along with it. I thought, oh yeah, I can't take care of him at home. I just went along with it. But really, all along, it never felt right to me. But I was afraid. I was afraid of what I thought it might be like to try to take care of him, when he couldn't really walk. So the time came for him to transfer. I went ahead and found a rehab place, and he was going to transfer. And I was waiting for them to pick him up. And I literally got a phone call that said, we can't take him. And I won't go into all the details, but it had to do with a medication and supplement he was taking that they couldn't administer to him. So I was really distraught at the time because, he had been in the hospital for 10 days and we were ready to go home. We were packed up. And I said, well, I don't know what to do with him. Where's he going to go? I was sleep deprived. I was just a total mess and I couldn't see anything clearly at all. So he stayed another couple nights in the hospital and I had a caregiver come and stay overnight with him because when somebody like Kyle is in the hospital, you can't leave their side. Somebody has to be with them all the time. And I spent a lot of time there myself. So I went home and I was so upset, so upset. What are we going to do? So exhausted. And I thought, okay, I need to know. I need to know what to do here, but I don't know. Like, I know that I'm so stirred up. And I went to sleep and I woke up and the answer was literally like on a billboard in my room. It was huge. It was there and it said, you need to bring him home. Like it just said, bring him home, bring him home. And it was, I mean, there wasn't any question. And I kind of told my husband, and he said, well, that's kind of what I thought all along. And so, um, so I let them know at the hospital. And long story short, we brought him home. We wheeled him in a wheelchair. He's typically not physically disabled in any way. So this was new. And I just will never wheeling him into his bedroom and looking at him and being, okay, now what do I do? What do I do? I didn't know how to transfer him out of the wheelchair into a chair. He's a man. He's a big 6-foot man. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how I was going to take care of him. I realized we had to have two people at one time because he couldn't be left alone for a second, like to go use the bathroom. Um, at that time, he couldn't. And I just remember sitting there going, okay, I guess we're going to figure this out. And literally, it was kind of like wisdom just took my hand, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, just take whatever the next step is, you know. And sometimes it was asking for help. Um, there were like a million next steps, but I just remember so navigating that situation that felt so daunting and so difficult and so impossible in my head when I actually got into the situation and it became real life. I just literally a step and a step and a step and a step. And I made mistakes. We had some rough times. I mean, I'm not going to say it was like this smooth, super smooth path, but in hindsight, I could see how it was just a step and a step and a step. It was all wisdom. I wasn't prepared for it. Whenever I tried to like think, like manage it, sort of like I would come up with these elaborate schedules and things, they always sort of crumbled in the face of life. Like things just kind of took off in their own direction, and my schedule was like, yeah, yeah, that's funny. That's funny. Um, and his recovery was that way. And it turned out we didn't really need as much help as I thought we needed. We had a physical therapist that came to the house and, he gave us some tips, but he just kind of said, he's just going to start to walk like a little bit at a time. And that's, he had fractures that were healing, but he had hardware so he could walk on it when he was ready. And that's just how it played out. It just, we helped him, we supported him, but he followed this wisdom of his body. He was connected to that wisdom, which when I first heard that in that initial conversation, I remember just not feeling like, well, how could he have so much wisdom? Because he's pretty challenged with his autism and all the other things that go with it. Like, I didn't see him as having wisdom. And then I started to wake up to that in that initial conversation. But even in the course of his recovering from this accident, um, I just remember watching him and him listening, somehow knowing what his body needed to do and what he couldn't do. And I was afraid he was going to bolt out of the chair and try to go walk. So everybody had to watch him closely. And he never tried to do that. Um, he didn't. And so I share this story because to me, it's such an incredible example of wisdom and how so often we don't know. And so often we get caught in our head with the things we're afraid of, or how something's going to be, or how something's going to play out. And we sure don't know. Um, and we sure can be guiding out, and to know when to ask help and know when to ask for support. Hopefully, it says internet connection's unstable. You can let me know, but my favorites in thinking about wisdom. And I think that anyone who has a child or adult child with special needs, it's such a beautiful thing to understand wisdom and to understand where our experience really comes from, and that our child is not the source of our suffering. That that's huge. That's huge. And it can be hard to see. It can really be hard to see. But when you start to notice what we have going on up here and how that creates that source of our suffering, even if you can just notice it like the littlest, tiniest bit, it changes the way you see life. It changes the way you see your child. It changes what you do. um, I was pretty frantic when Kyle was little. We were doing this special homeschool program, and it required a lot of hours and a lot of people coming in the home. And I thought if I just did it this certain perfect way, then I would fix him, and um, put a lot of pressure on myself. And as the years went by, like, I couldn't maintain that level, but I sure tried for a long time. And I can only think, if I really understood where my experience was coming from, it might have been a little different. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, that's really a lot. I think just as this understanding alters, how you experience your child, and how you proceed forward, and what decisions you make, and what you know to do and what you know not to do, and when you course correct. um, it's really powerful. It's really powerful. And something you said too about just how what I write in my book, and I try to tell this to people, does apply just to life in general. Because as we were talking a little bit about, every single one of us has so many things that come to us that we don't feel prepared for, we don't want, or we resist. I mean, look at the last year, over a year already, of COVID in our personal lives and in the world. None of us were prepared for that. I mean, who would have ever imagined the way things played out, with people being shut in, and personally the way things played out in our home. Um, and we're all faced with those things. And I think that understanding where our experience comes from, I don't know, it just helps us. We're still going to get resistant, um, but it helps us navigate with more grace, and it helps us notice that resistance. And I know I write about that in Space of Love, because boy, when I see myself resisting and I notice it, um, it it's kind of like magic. Like, it's like, okay, I just kind of like take a little step, um, take a little step. Or when you get into this, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do, and it doesn't seem like there could possibly be an answer. And I'll share another little story, if that's okay. So this is super fresh, super fresh. So Kyle just moved 2 weeks ago, and this is an enormous thing in our life. And Ellen knows about this. It's been in the works for about 3 years. And he moved to this amazing community. He's in his own home in this amazing community for people with special needs. And each family is responsible for um, making the individual arrangements for their individual child, because everybody's different that lives there, and the state provides the caregiver, or they pay the caregivers, and they sort of provide them, but you kind of have to help find them and all of that. So anyway, there's a lot to that story, but the the long story short of it is we had some caregivers in our home that moved over there with him, um, and are working over there. But one of them is very new. She wasn't really working in our home. And it's been a real struggle for her with him because she's on the overnight shift. So she basically is responsible to put him to bed and then take care of him in the morning, get him a shower. And she was really struggling with the putting him to bed part. And he was struggling with her mainly because they don't have a relationship together. She doesn't really understand him yet. And I was anxious about it. It's been like a whole little thing. And it just she just was having trouble getting him in bed. And I was helping. I wasn't sure how much to help, all this kind of thing. And I was talking to a friend of mine actually, who she used to work with Kyle before COVID, and she's kind of been my some guidance on the phone over the last year. And I was telling her about the situation, and I said, they just don't have a relationship together, and I don't know how they can have one because she can't come any other shifts. I was just on this whole, how is this ever going to happen? She's there when he's sleeping, just this whole thing. And she says, well, maybe there's something she could do with him before he goes to bed that would help that relationship thing. Because what she was doing was just coming right away, getting him ready and trying to get him into bed. That's what I was suggesting. And so she said, so if he gets to bed a little later, okay, which is fine because he wasn't sleeping well anyway. And she suggests to me, how about she gives him a foot massage, which he loves foot massages with lotion, and make that sort of their routine and their time to connect with each other. And then maybe he'll go to bed easier. And I don't know if it's going to work tonight, but it sure worked last night. It sure worked. I left the house. I was there and she was giving him this foot massage. And then I went home, and I can see on the camera on my phone if I want to. And I look in the camera and he's in bed. He's asleep like in 15 minutes later. And I guess I share that for so many number of reasons. So it looked hopeless to me, honestly, given the hours she worked and she doesn't know him. It's going to take a year for her to get enough hours to build a relationship with him. Like, I couldn't see any way out to that. And, but I kind of knew enough to share this with my friend because I know she always kind of has a new perspective, something else to see. And when she said that, I was kind of like, oh, yeah, that resonated with me. I didn't know if it would help even him go to bed, but I knew it could help them build their relationship. I was so stuck, I wasn't seeing anything that could be done. And it's just such an example of my wisdom kind of hooking up with her wisdom that said, hey, how about you try this? And knowing when she said that, oh, yeah, that's the thing to try. That's the thing to do. Because she was feeling kind of discouraged too. Um, so I guess I love knowing that there's so many times in life we get stuck and we're at this dead end. We don't know what to do. It seems impossible. It seems like there can't possibly be a solution to something. And then where did that come from? How is there all of a sudden a solution to that? And I love that, and I just think it's so incredibly helpful, well, for all of us with all our situations. But getting back to having a child with autism or special needs, it's so helpful because there aren't any formulas. um, there aren't any, if you do this, this will just happen. It just doesn't work that way. Like life is so fluid and so dynamic. And I think understanding wisdom is there, understanding thought is creating our experience, just allows us to flow, I think, a little bit better, even when we're resisting. I feel like we're still in just a little bit of this a sense of flow. We're in that flow of life. And I have just along the lines about that, about life flowing and being dynamic. So before Kyle moved in, I spent a few weeks writing a manual, basically. I sort of had already had one, but I revised it to where it was this 80-page, and it's important. It has good information about him, and it has information about his house and what I want done here and what I want done there. And of course, I want people to read it. But what I realize is watching how things are playing out is the manual's there, it's great, but the everything's taking place in real time. People are coming to work with him. Things are happening. We're making adjustments. We're going, oh, this is what we need to do. Oh, that's what we need to do. The things that I did with him before bed might not necessarily be the things for them to do. They have to find their own things because their relationship with him is dynamic. And I feel like understanding the principles kind of feeds into that awareness that, well, getting back to flow, like relationships are in flow. And that's the relationships are the super important part. This caregiver could do all the things I tell her to do to get him to bed, but if she hasn't got that relationship with him, which is unique to her, there's no manual for that part. you know there's no manual for how to build a relationship with somebody. um it's that's the key. And that happens one moment at a time, and it happens by being in the moment. And we started to touch on this a little before this we got off and running, um, about COVID, and you were asking, it must have been hard on Kyle to not be in his routine. And I said at first it was, but that didn't last very long. It was really way harder on me because I was still thinking it should not be this way and it should be a different way. And Kyle was like, okay, not going to my program anymore. Where are we going? I'm ready to go. Let's go to the park. And he's like, okay. We'd be sitting at the park on a rock. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes I'd be like, how long is this going to be going on? How long am I going to be the only caregiver? How long is he never going to go to a program? And he's just sitting there, the birds. I just have a sense of him, and I could be wrong, but I feel like he's a lot more in the moment. Um, he's more in the moment than we are. Um, I had a point to that. Where was I going? Oh, just about being in the moment, and that um, that's really how life rolls along, is just this one moment and one moment and one moment. And we get very much in our head in the planning and the past and the future and how's this going to play out and the worrying. And I just don't think Kyle does that as much. I feel like he's more like immediate, and he's a little bit, oh, well, this is how it is now. We took him, we had to do some things we never did with him, because of COVID and not having caregivers and all that. And one of those things was we took a road trip with him. Um, one of my daughters lives in Denver, and we have a little grandson. And in the middle of the summer, we were kind of like, when are we ever going to see them? You know, at this rate, it just seemed so hopeless. And we would usually fly to them and leave Kyle home, and we didn't have a caregiver and nobody's flying. And so one day, and this was another wisdom inspired decision, and I just love it because it led to all these things. One day I got this idea that maybe we need to take him with us travel with Kyle. Like, we really haven't done that. And I literally had to call somebody and say, am I crazy? This idea just came to me. Like, I think we should take Kyle to Denver. Like, am I really crazy? And she's like, no, I think that's amazing. The same girl that gave me the idea about the foot massage. And yeah, I dropped off completely.
Yeah. Okay, you're back.
Okay, I'm back. I was talking about another wisdom inspired decision, and I had no idea how we were going to pull that one off either, because Kyle has autism and that means he struggles with change. And there were some things that were hard, but you know what? By the third or fourth day, he was kind of like, okay, we live here now. Like, that's what it seemed like. And beautiful things happened with him and my grandson. And we learned a lot of things. And we ended up doing it again in November, a second time. And then I think it kind of prepared him for moving out, because he's been able to adjust to his new environment pretty quickly. Now we've had bumps in the road, with different things, but for the most part, he's kind of like, oh, I live here now. That's what it seems like. He can't speak and tell me that. But again, like, wisdom, 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 and I could have resisted that initial idea when I said, oh, let's take him. Like, oh no, are you crazy? Like, that's going to be too much. He won't be able to handle it. You won't be able to handle it. My daughter won't like it. And my daughter said, wow, Kyle is doing so well in my house. And you can do this again. And for her to say that was amazing. So yeah, just wisdom is just there. It's just there. And it's not always great stuff. Sometimes we go, okay, I won't do that again. But so I feel like I'll break a little bit for questions, and then if there aren't any, then I'll say more. So
Yeah, I just want to say, knowing you, but hearing you share all this today, I'm really aware of your flow and your moving, how you move through the experiences of life,
mm,
and how like I just don't hear the self-judgment that life or the bumps should be different than they are. And that's like I'm hearing that deeply, and it's really moving me.
mm,
And I want to also say something similar to what Bonnie said about the book. I don't know if you've actually heard me say this to you. I think maybe you have, but to be honest, I just want people who are listening and watching now to, like, I read the book with zero interest in the book, but like, okay, Gal's someone I like and getting to know her. And so I'll read her book. And I was so moved into the space of love.
mm,
The book has nothing, I mean, on one level, it has nothing to do with special needs or autism. Like Bonnie said, it has everything to do with the space of love that is constantly present in us, and it's almost like the stories of your life are woven into that, and the poetry and the stories, and I just want to, just a huge plug for, if you're listening,
mhm,
to take a listen to the book, or read, because it's really, I was surprised at how moved I
mm.
was. So
Thank you, Ella.
and also to let Bonnie know that I'm going to be ending here and continuing on the phone. So when you see me, let me in. When you see the 602 number, let me in. Thank you.
I have a question, and my
Yeah.
name is Sandra Thomas. I'm the one on the picture up there.
Okay.
And what is the difference, or is there a difference between insight and wisdom? What would you say? Or are they the same?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I guess in some ways they're the same. Let me, I might have to sort this out as I speak. I mean, I always think of insight as a new thought, basically, is how I understand insight. A
Okay.
new way of seeing something. Um, so I guess in some ways, isn't that wisdom? I'm not sure. I feel like there might be some sort of a difference. Maybe it's semantic.
Okay.
I,
Okay.
yeah. But I guess I see wisdom, maybe I see wisdom as something a little bit larger, as just
Okay.
some sort of energy that we are connected to. Like,
Okay. I think I got it.
okay.
You told me, you gave me an understanding about insight, but you just said something about wisdom being an energy that we are connected to. And what I believe from my perspective is more on a level of divine energy.
Hmm.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Um, I was just going to say something about something that Ellen said about being in the flow, bumps, bumps and everything. And I think that just reminds me of the other thing about the principles that I love, is that it kind of gives us permission to be human and to go through the ups and downs, and that that's okay and that's part of the experience. Like, it's not that, okay, well, it's thought created, so you better have some different thoughts. You shouldn't be having that experience. Like, there isn't, like, that kind of drops away, to where you end up, I feel, giving yourself permission to be in a bad experience, and understanding it's going to flow through, but in certain moments you're not having a good experience. And before, at least for me, so the program that I was involved with when Kyle was very little, their mantra was really that you choose to be happy and your attitude makes a big difference on how well your child does. So there was always like a little bit of a pressure on, I need to be happy or Kyle's not going to do well. And that's a lot of pressure. Oh my, like, considering that your feelings and thoughts are always in flow and they're not always going to be happy ones. Sometimes they might be and sometimes they might not. Like, the pressure to try to micromanage your experience is a lot. It's a lot. And I remember feeling that pressure and doing all the typical things that maybe some people do to change our experience so that it is a happy one and it is a good one. Um, and that adds another load. So if you're carrying that load and the load of your child with special need, that's a big load. But um, being in the flow, like Ellen said, and being allowed to feel bad in a day, and being allowed for something to be hard and not having to fix that, um, and that's okay. Like, what if that's okay? What if the fact that the first night that I came home, I slept the first night at Kyle's, the first 5 nights. The first night I came home, I felt really panicky. Like, okay, so that didn't have to be any other way. Like, I felt panicky. It didn't feel good. I was worried. But I didn't have to fix that feeling or that state. That's I love that. I just love that. Like, that's it just takes the pressure off. And I think it really does help things flow through with more ease, because we're not in there with the screwdriver trying to like, well, let me tweak this. I need to have a new thought. Let me write that new thought down 12 times and see if that helps. I don't know. Anybody else have more questions? Or
Hello,
want
this
me
is
to-
this
yeah,
is Veena here,
yes.
from the UK. Um, I don't mean to oversimplify or, diminish the experience, but it just felt to me like things are as simple as just step away from overthinking, and you you then figure out the solution. I think sometimes we step away from, physically step away, but mentally we're still there. And that is probably, it just feels like, oh my God, that's so simple. Yet so many of us don't do it. I'm trying to become a coach, and would like to use the 3 principles to coach. Sometimes it feels like that's it. That's it. If the client gets that, that's it. That's no big deal, if that makes sense. Do you think I'm missing something?
No, I don't really. Yeah, this understanding, I think the more I'm in it, the simpler it looks to me. But simple doesn't mean necessarily, it has this beautiful simplicity to it, but it doesn't necessarily mean we can automatically do that all the
Yeah, it's not easy. It's
yeah.
simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah, kind of, but maybe that's our thinking too. It's not easy. But yeah.
When I when I tried to calm down my thinking, because I became aware the moment I learned about the 3 principles. I became so aware of how much I was thinking, and then about 2-3 weeks, it was a bit of a work, like monitoring my thinking and calming it down and saying, okay, that'll pass, that'll pass. And then I realized that it started happening automatically. So I think like everything, it needs a bit of practice. And once you get past that point, that's the new you.
Well, yeah, I mean, it will happen automatically. I don't think we can think ourselves to that less thinking state. And I think what happens is we find ourselves doing things. So I'll give you the example of last night when I talked to my friend and she gave me the foot massage idea. I didn't even think I realized at the time how super stirred up I was. But I called her mainly because we hadn't talked in a week. Like, it just looked like a good idea to call her last night. We haven't talked in a week. I wonder how she's doing. Kyle was resting, had some moments. Let me call Tammy. And she's, how's it going? And I'm sharing all the stuff. And then I tell her about this caregiver. And so it wasn't even like, I feel like I didn't make any decision. I didn't even call her thinking, oh, Tammy's going to be able to help me with this problem. I was sort of in some sort of flow of, and as I'm sharing with her, I can see almost the particles starting to settle. Like the thinking, things were just, I'm sharing with her and she's talking to me and I start to relax. But it was in the flow of life, like we talked about before. So yeah, it helps to step back for sure in our minds, because our minds get all and then we can't see a thing. It's like navigating in the dark with some fog. There's nothing, I can't see one solution for this. But I don't know, I think sometimes we can maybe have a little more influence on looking in another direction, but it's almost like it just sort of happens. I don't know. That's my experience of it, that it often, I just find myself someplace else. It's like taking a walk and you just all of a sudden find yourself in a different neighborhood than where you set out to go. And that's kind of what happened last night. I just like I was taking a walk and all of a sudden I was in a new neighborhood and the surroundings were different. But I didn't have that. It wasn't my intention, really. I
That's
don't know if that
interesting.
makes sense. Yeah.
I think that there'll be a fine line between, how when something is causing us distress, sort of a feeling, or disturbance, let's just call it a negative feeling. Um, it's probably not the best idea to keep revisiting it and replaying it in the head, isn't it? So I think at some level you were probably already in the solution space, on the boundaries of it, and then having the conversation without too much emotion attached to it probably helped it fall in place. Don't know. Speculation.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I do know that, yeah, it doesn't particularly help to be replaying, but we
Mm,
tend to do that as
yeah.
humans. At least I do it. I mean, that's sort of like almost like our go-to way of trying to figure something out is, let me see if I can replay that scenario a dozen times. And you know and wisdom can get through that, I think. But it's probably not the clearest route to a solution, I guess. I don't
Mm,
know, the more I see wisdom, though, the more I see I used to think this is only how wisdom came in this certain way, but I feel like it comes in so many different packages in so many ways, and
mm,
it slips through cracks. It's like you know how there's some bugs, like I think cockroaches can make themselves really flat, right, and go under a door. Like I feel like that's not the greatest example of wisdom.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
I feel like wisdom can get through like the tiniest space, like even the space in your head that's going, it's so busy and you're replaying all the things and old thoughts. Like I believe that wisdom can get through that. And I used to think I had to have a quiet head for wisdom, but I don't know. I think wisdom is just that force that it is, that energy, like it can't help itself almost. I don't
Mm,
know. That's how it looks
interesting.
to me. Yeah.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you. I was just reading the chat. Yeah.
Hi, Gail. I'm Angelina from Ireland. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes.
Just to follow on from the last lady, Vina, I'm very new to this. I have a disabled daughter with a severe intellectual disability, so I understand the 24/7 care. And are you saying just to let thought be? Because I've done that. I've done the controlling thing with her and have to sort everything and try to control everybody around me who cares for her. Like I would find I have a very, very busy mind. So are you saying that you just leave that be and just accept it the way it is, and that wisdom will still get through that busy mind?
Um, kind of, but not as necessarily a prescription. I think that the best thing we can do is to notice when we notice that we have a busy mind. Because I don't know about you guys, but when I'm in the middle of a really busy mind, I'm in the middle of a busy mind, and I can't, I don't know that I can will myself to quit that. Like, stop that. Like, you've had that thought 15 times already. That's enough. You know, I feel like it's rolling, but I know that it can calm at any time. I know that sometimes it helps to take a walk, but sometimes I could take a walk and I still have a busy mind. So there's never a formula, but yeah, I don't think we have to be afraid of that, I guess. And maybe when we start to learn that it's our thoughts that create our experience, we get a little like when you first hear that, you're like, well, I better really work on getting some better thoughts because I'm really messing up my experience. But you can't really do that specifically. Like, I think just the awareness of the thought created nature of our experience shifts something for you, but it's without you getting in there with the screwdriver and trying to do this. Like, they do settle. That's just the your mind does settle, and even if it only settles for a few seconds and then it amps up again, it's still settled. And if you start to get a feel for that and start to see that and notice it, it'll happen more on its own. It'll just happen on its own, and you'll notice it more on its own, and you'll start to even notice wisdom of things that maybe don't even look like wisdom to you. That will be wisdom. Did that answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it did. I suppose I have done so many things, from meditation to going to the walks to sea swimming. I've tried a little bit of everything. I still find the busy mind is still there a lot of the time. I suppose I'm still maybe struggling a small bit to grasp the three principles from a felt experience. From an intellectual point of view, I have a fair idea what it means, but just from the felt experience, I seem to still be struggling with that. And I am looking at my thoughts, and maybe I'm just overlooking at them instead of just going, that's the way it is today. Is that what you're saying to do? Just leave them be?
Yeah. I mean, again, without prescribing that, as a thing to do, is, yeah, to kind of, there, we're not going to get over that as long as we're human beings. I think that's just how our system operates, and it has the best of intentions. I feel like the intentions of your busy mind are to help you, like that, almost like that's wisdom. It's just a little misguided because overthinking isn't really where the juicy stuff is, kind of. But your human system is saying, well, when I don't know if this is a great example, but when we beat your heart, we do it repetitively over, and it works pretty well there. So you got a problem? Just keep thinking about it. Just think, and it'll take care of it. But it's not like that with that kind of thing. Somebody gave the example of the snow globe, which you may have heard too, and that's my favorite too, is that, it's a snow globe that's shaken up, and then when it starts to just settle on its own, you see more. But you can't get in there while it's in that snow globe and force the pieces of snow to quit doing what they're doing instantly. Like, stop that. Stop moving like that. You can't, just can't do it. So I guess if I were to give advice, I think I would say, like, don't worry that you're overthinking. Welcome to being a human being. And notice wisdom. Notice when your mind does settle. Like, just sort of notice, but lightly, like not necessarily under the microscope, but more like the same way that you notice, I don't know, the sunrise, or your daughter's smile, or just kind of an awareness. And I think that just us talking about it here, I think you're going to notice. I think just it's like shining the light on something that maybe you weren't clear on or weren't aware of. I think you're going to see, you won't be able to help yourself in a way. So
Thank you for giving me permission to have a busy mind. That's a
Yeah.
relief. That's a relief, actually, because
Yeah.
I've always criticized it and judged it. So yeah, it's great to know
Yeah.
that it's all right.
Yeah, so you can cross that off your list. Like, That's great, because you have enough to do taking care of your daughter, right? I'm sure
Yeah,
you.
no, and I think maybe you've just, yeah, I think maybe you've just given me something there, an insight into, yeah, it's okay to have a busy mind. It's not the end of the world. I have been judging. I have been going, why am I really zen, and why am I accepting this more, and why isn't every moment flowing when they're not? Some do, some
Yeah.
don't. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for that, Gail.
Oh,
That was
you're
wonderful.
welcome. Thank you.
I love what you said about just feeling whatever you're feeling. And it occurs to me, and also, I don't have to believe whatever I'm thinking. And the thinking, I'm seeing more and more that, whereas we're always feeling or thinking, but it's that my mind comes along and narrates whatever that feeling is. And that narration of it is what then really grinds me to whatever. And just that reminder, I don't have to believe what I'm thinking. I don't have to believe. Is it true? Is it true? That kind of thing. The other thing you said about the happiness, well, yeah, it's a lot easier on everything when I'm in a good mood. But then when it becomes I should, and that changes again. And I don't have to believe that thought. And I think I read your book. It's been some time, but I just remember having a nice feeling of how you just allowed yourself to lovingly be as best you could. And that's the way my memory has it. So
Yeah.
I just appreciate what that must be like 24/7. But that's like we're all 24/7 with our mind. So we just don't have like also I have a colleague, years, wonderful man, has children. When he died 2 or 3 months ago, and working with the kids now, how sad. He was the Rock of Gibraltar. He was just a wonderful, wonderful guy. But they were so focused on him. I mean, they were just so sad, so lost. As one put it, he did everything for his father. He had to pick him up. He had dialysis and gradually died. But he did everything. He picked him up, did physically. He was there, concentrated. His whole focus was on his dad. He lived his dad. He loved his dad. He respected him. He just was the greatest man to him. And when he was gone, it was like, I've got nothing. I don't even know where I am. I just know this is so profound. I can't sleep and so forth. But I guess the reason I'm thinking of this is that when we are so 24/7 focused on something, it isn't all bad either. And that it gave him purpose, meaning. And he was fortunate enough that he didn't have a busy mind of resentment or why should or what that, because he was so embracing the love that he had.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I just wanted to share that.
That's
It's
really
just,
beautiful. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And I just see what a gift you give, your Cal's giving you, and vice versa, the way you approach it, how you're sharing it with the world. And I can see Angelina, how much she is receiving from you, that permission to, golly, I think the thought, I'm always doing the best I can. Now, it doesn't take much energy to do that. And that's always a good feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't become like I should think that way. No, that just comes pretty naturally once I
Yeah.
see it. Once I
Yeah.
see it.
I love
Okay.
that. I love that. Yeah. Somebody said something about reading a poem, which I don't know how much time we have, but I can do that, but I have to go to another
Yeah.
room to get the book. So do you guys want me to read a poem from the book or?
Yeah, I think that'd be lovely.
Okay. So just bear with me for 2 seconds. I have to tell you something. When I went to get this book, So for a while, usually I would have books laying around and there would be books in my car and I was giving them away and selling them and whatnot. And I just didn't have any books laying around and they were in a box. This is my third book, but my first principles book. They were in a box under the boxes of my other books. And just 2 days ago, I wanted to give some books to some of our new staff. And so I had my husband get out these boxes crammed in this closet, and he starts to go to put the box away. And I said, no, leave it out. He says, you need this whole box? I said, I think I do. So the box was just kind of sitting and I was running up there to get it thinking, well, I'm so glad that I told him to leave that out because otherwise I would have had to tear apart a closet to go get a book for you guys. So anyway, okay. I opened to this page, so I think it was the one I was meant to read. So it's called Resilience, which next to wisdom might be my other favorite. Resilience. Like a tree in the wind, he sways. First a little, then a lot. Suddenly the wind turns wild, a storm now. Branches move, crackle, and break, falling to the ground. Even the thick trunk is shaking. He is in the grips of a cycle, an inner force, a storm that throws him this way and that, from the inside out. If he had branches and leaves, they would drop. The wind can't be stopped by the tree, or my son, or I. It stops when it stops. And somehow he knows what to do during the storm. I see that now. I didn't before. Curl up, rest, sit, pace. Stay in the groove of a fixed pattern of movement. Don't let us take off the item which protects him. Deep in his core, his trunk, he is okay. Shaking in the wind, but okay on the inside. Nature's design of trees and humans. The tree is resilient, its trunk solid, despite what the branches and leaves are doing. You can chop it down or even burn it, and there is a good chance it will sprout and grow something. Because that's part of the design of trees, to bounce back despite wind and humans. Resilient naturally. Kyle, resilient naturally. Me, resilient naturally. Bouncing back as if there never was a cycle, a storm, as if it never happened. Better than ever, new sprouts, limbs, leaves, growth, big and small. Resilience, an intimate part of the design, the default setting of trees and humans, including me and my son.
That's really beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. What a lovely way to end this webinar.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
appreciated this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to say something?
No, yeah, it was great. If anyone you have a Nobel.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there you go. Go on. I think you're back, maybe.
So, on the website is a blog, which I have not written much in the last year, but I'm hoping to get back to it soon. But if you want to read more, there are older blog posts that are on there. And as you said, the book is available in audio, and one of my 3P colleagues narrated it, and it's beautiful. And yeah, so thank you guys.
And I'll post your website, and I can post a link for the book underneath the recording as well, so people can access it. Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you. And just to let everybody know, the next webinar is April 22nd, and it's with both George and Linda Pransky. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who came on live. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you, Gayle. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Rachel. Be well.
Big hug.